Hi, creative friends. This is Shreya, and thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to do something just a little bit differently today. I'm going to be working on two pieces at the same time. Now, I used to work this way all the time, about 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I think it started from me working on children's cardboard books where I was prepping the pages because it is a very tedious process in the beginning because you can only work on one spread at a time. Like you have to put your collage with the Mod Podge down, and so you can't flip it and work on like 2 or 3 spreads at one time because the pages are going to stick. And so because it took so many hours like to do that, to prep your pages, I started working on like 4 or 5 books at once. And I used to even work on like 6, 7, 8 pieces of paper, Bristol paper, whatever. Now, obviously, there are advantages to working in this way, and there's also disadvantages. And I know for me, like, I don't want my pieces to look exactly the same. So that is like a huge pitfall that I just have to be aware of. Like, if they start looking too much alike, then then I try to like separate them and then focus on each one separately. But it's a great way to work, not only creatively, and I'll talk about it while I'm working, but also if you're working on, say, a body of work and you want there to be similarities between, say, 15 or 20 pieces, then obviously you can start them all off with the same foundation. And then you can, separate them to finish them off so they don't look the same. But anyways, I'm just going to dive right in. I do have some pieces of collage over here, my dictionary pages, and just some scrapbooking papers that I don't know if I'm going to use them or not. Oops. But one of the main pieces of advice I can give you when you first start working in this way, and even as you get more comfortable, working in this way, is to not use too many different colors, like to have a not a limited palette, but just like don't start like introducing too many colors because that can complicate things. At least that's the way it is for me. So obviously, if that resonates with you, then take that piece of advice because I had to learn the hard way. So I have this Dilutions ink spray, and I've had them for so long. I have a whole bunch of them that the spray has clogged up a bit, which is fine because, now I can just kind of use my fingers. So basically, I'm just going to make some random kind of marks. And as you can see, I'm treating both the pieces of paper as if they are one sheet of paper. They're two separate sheets, but I'm going back and forth. And one of the great reasons to work this way, that I really, really love, is that if we work on one piece, we can get like so fixated on it where we second guess every single line and stroke and like, oh, should I do this? And I know that that's the way it is for me anyways. So once again, I'm going to pretend this is one sheet of paper. And if I had like, say, 4 sheets of paper here, like 2 more sheets of paper, I would do the same thing. I would pretend it's one sheet of paper. And that way you have continuity between the two. And it really kind of lends to some interesting kind of marks and lines and stuff like that. But anyways, what I was saying is that, you can like really get fixated on, oh, should I do this? Should I not do this? Etc., etc. But if you're working on like a lot of pieces at one time, then I find that I'm not so emotionally invested in any one piece because you're just like going back and forth. There's not so much of a like, oh, this has to turn out a certain way. At least that's the way it is for me. And it really helped me loosen up, like, incredibly. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drip, I don't know if I want to use that color. I think I need some blue. Oh, and some gold too. Gold is always a good color for me to dive into. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, that is so beautiful. So another reason to work this way is actually time. And like I mentioned with the cardboard books, it is so time consuming. Sure, once you get it all done, prepping the pages, it's worth it, absolutely. But initially, it's just a very tedious, boring, time consuming process. So when you work on, multiple sheets of paper or canvases or whatever at one time, it does save you time. And, it depending on like if that's important to you or not, it may or may not be. But I know for me, like it really did help me. And, when people wonder, like, especially when you're working in an art journal and completing an art journal, like if there's, I don't know, say there's 20 pages in your art journal. Well, to have a completed art journal, that requires a lot of time. It really does. And while I may not work on multiple sheets to finish off the page, to start off your pages, yeah, it does save time. And that was a factor for me also, especially when my daughter was younger. Like I didn't have a lot of time to create, like not like I did before I had her. So yeah, so time became very important, like prepping your pages and just creating backgrounds. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to take one of the sheets and I'm just going to turn it around, and that's just going to, just inject a new energy to the page a little bit, because like I said, one of the pitfalls is that it can end up looking too much the same, and I don't want that. Like I don't want them to look exactly the same, whatever they might turn out to be. you know So let me just talk a bit about my healing ancestral trauma journal, because I've had a few comments where people have noticed that, the pages, they're different, but they feel similar. And that is very intentional, because I talked about this in another video, but every single page in that art journal has the same composition. They are just different variations. They're just variations of the exact same composition, which is the cross composition. And I made, I think, a few videos on that actually. So even though each page is completely different, they have that same underlying structure. So, somebody might not be able to pick up that every single page in there has a cross composition or has a similar or the same composition actually, but you can pick up on the fact that there are similarities on each page, and that's what's one of the things that's tying the whole journal together in an artistic sense, if you will. So you can do that with different things. It doesn't have to be composition. You can pick any element of art. So you can pick, say, a specific color palette. And that's another thing that ties that journal together, is I'm using more muted colors. Now, not on every page, because there are some pages where I have this like really super bold red, but there's a symbolic reason for that. But you can pick any kind of element and you can repeat it on each of your art journal pages, so you have some sense of continuity. Or you don't have to. I mean, it's totally up to you, like how you want to make your journal. But these are all things that I think about, when I'm making my art journal. And for me, generally, I either want the whole entire art journal to be bound by a theme, like a specific, say I made a journal on color. I just called it my color journal, and it was just for me to learn. But, every single spread in there was about color, different color palettes, blah, blah, blah. And I made a few videos on that too, on my color journal. So some other journals, they're bound by a purpose. So say healing ancestral trauma, that whole purpose of that whole journal is exactly what it says. So yeah, you know, I like to do that. I like to bind my journals by a certain theme. And you can even make a journal called Red, which I might do. I'm thinking about doing that actually. I just want to make a whole journal like called Red because it just makes me happy. And I just like thinking about it is just like, oh my God, I'm just so excited about it. Yeah, so I'm gonna turn both of them around again. And so like I was saying, you might want to start off with, like, you know, just say you're working on 2 pieces of paper or 10 pieces of paper, it doesn't matter. I used to actually throw a canvas cloth on the grass and then just work outside. It's the best because things dry so fast. I'm not worried about, like, you know, making a mess. You know, you can spray stuff, you can do whatever. And I actually love working that way. And I used to do that a lot with my daughter when she was younger. But just say that you are going to work, it doesn't matter how many pieces of paper, whether it's 2 or 20, whatever. You might want to work on the multiple pieces, say for 50% of the piece or 60 or 70% of the piece. And then what I usually do is I separate them at some point and I finish them off separately because, like I said, I personally, I don't want them to look like the same. I want them to have similarities, but I don't want them to like be a replica of each other. They need to have their own personality, so to speak. So I'm just gonna put some of this gorgeous pink here. And just smush that. And I'm just gonna add like some of this chalk paint here. Now, the great thing about this chalk paint, you guys, is that you can use it really thick and it can give you, it has exceptional coverage. It will cover anything and everything completely if you use it like really thick. And sometimes I've even had to add like a couple of coats. But if you water it down and kind of like, see how I'm doing right here, and then you allow it to dry naturally, you get some really delicious color feels. And you can, because I've watered it down, now I can see what's behind it, and it's just so beautifully. The trick is to allow it to dry naturally. Like, I don't want to use a heating tool on this. Okay, you guys, so if you've watched all the way to the end, thank you so much. And I'm going to allow this to dry. And like I said, that's why it's so great to work outside, because this would be dry in like 5 seconds. Well, I'm just exaggerating, but it would dry so much faster out in the sun. So anyways, I am going to leave this here, and then I'm going to come back and we'll see where it wants to go. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.